Periscope and Facebook and Twitter, and I think YouTube as well. Brian Kamenetzky and Andy Kamenetzky, joined tonight by Aaron Larsoul from the Official Lakers podcast. As always, brought to you by Delicious Pizza. 20% off at Delicious Pizza when you tell them the Cam Brothers sent you 2 locations, West Adams and in Hollywood.
You a pizza guy, Aaron? Because it's good pizza.
I mean, it is. You know what? I've been to the one in Hollywood.
Excellent.
Yeah, it is. It is quite delicious. I am at this point of my life, especially because we're in quarantine and working out has been difficult. I am a pizza toppings guy. So I'm the annoying guy that will scrape all the cheese and pepperoni off of the pizza because I'm keto now, so I'm staying away from the carbs. But generally,
okay. I was about to say, so you just eat the crust? No, you eat all the stuff on top.
Right.
Okay.
I eat everything but the crust.
All right. That sounds like
it's really annoying. It's
like the worst album ever. Everything but the crust. This was obviously intended when we asked you earlier this week, Aaron, to be part of our broadcast tonight. Obviously, it was going to be a post game for Game 5. I think all of us assumed that we would be doing a post mortem on the Lakers and Trailblazers, especially
with no Dame. Yeah.
This was going to be, and then we look forward. Who's going to win OKC? Who's going to win that Houston? Like whatever it is. And to say that agenda has been upended is a just gross understatement. This is one of the most extraordinary days that I have ever seen, certainly in sports. And that includes the one where the NBA shut down only a few weeks ago.
I reached out to Dave Zirin over Twitter, sports editor for The Nation. He is as qualified a voice when it comes to specifically sports and politics, that history, as anybody you'll find. He's an expert. And I asked him, is there any comp to what we're seeing right now? And he said, in terms of the playoffs, and this was before, by the way, baseball started following suit in MLS and these other leagues, he said no. He recommended me to Professor Lou Moore, who is a historian as well, in terms of, he said, you could find some sort of inexact parallels, but where we are right now, these are uncharted waters. I mean, globally speaking, I mean, literally the globe, but also in this country, but sports specifically, what is happening right now has really never happened before.
Yeah, I think I saw on Twitter that I think it was in 1961, Bill Russell and a few of the other Celtics refused to play a game to protest the same thing, which speaks to all of this, right?
Yeah.
60 years ago, Bill Russell sat, but that was a preseason game. And the fact that Bill Russell sat out of a game as an activist to protest this, and we have made so little progress that we're having to have the same thing happen 60 years later, I think speaks to all of this. I posted, my father died 22 years ago or something like that. But in June, late June was his birthday. And I posted a picture on Instagram and Twitter that I reposted today that was basically him here in Pasadena, saying, it was a picture of him in the newspaper he was an activist, among other things that were not as positive, but the caption for the picture is the white community doesn't care about us. And the fact that, again, 50 years or so later, we're still having the same conversation, so much so that all of these athletes are willing to basically put their careers on the line because this means so much. I think that is what has struck me so much, that finally, LeBron and me and whoever, we've just had enough and nothing else is working. So hopefully this will be something to get the nation and perhaps the world's attention. But I commend, we talked about this before we went on. This is all of our livelihoods, right? The NBA is my favorite thing on planet Earth. I love the NBA. It is my livelihood. It is my joy. It is my peace. But I can do nothing but commend the guys for taking a stand. Finally.
Yeah. There is a ton to catch up on. Obviously, games today postponed. today being Wednesday, tomorrow's game, Thursday's games, I believe, have they already been postponed? I believe they have.
I don't think they've been officially postponed.
There's a meeting tomorrow at 11
Correct.
o'clock Eastern.
Correct.
8 o'clock local time.
And the governors are also the governors, for the listeners out there and viewers, I guess this is a video and audio. Yeah.
Yes.
For the listeners,
speaking to all the people.
For the listeners and viewers out there that don't know who the governors are, they are generally the owners of all the NBA teams, but not necessarily. They are who represents all of the NBA teams at official functions, official NBA meetings, make the decision. So there's a governors meeting also tomorrow morning to kind of figure out what's going to happen from a league perspective.
And then there, I was just going to say, Andy, real quick, and from there, there was a meeting this afternoon in which teams reportedly voted on whether or not they wanted to keep playing in the bubble. Every team by reports voted yes, except for the Lakers and Clippers. That does not necessarily mean that the season is over or that those two teams are leaving. LeBron James reportedly demanding more action before, I guess, potentially, and I'm hypothesizing here a little bit, agreeing to play. So there's a lot to talk about, but I think the first thing I wanted to ask you guys was just like, really, what was your reaction when you saw it? Like, because this is it's almost, there's so much happening in the world right now. I guess you could gloss over this as just like a thing that's happening. This is an extraordinary moment, I think, in sports and certainly the NBA. This is a playoff game that the Milwaukee Bucks refused to go out and play. And then the rest of the league and the players in this league followed them in solidarity.
So my first reaction was, wow. And then 1A was good. And I think what you said about like the fact that this could get glossed over is exactly the point. There is so much happening in the world. Nothing from a global perspective and a long-term perspective, nothing more important than this. Obviously, it's kind of the timing of it is fascinating with the virus also. But like, as well as you think that has been handled or mishandled here or throughout the globe, at some point we're going to get through that, right? There have been viruses that have come and gone. But in this country specifically, systemic racism, injustice has been perpetuated for 400 years, at least. So the fact that all of this other stuff is going on, I think is exactly the point. And that, we were joking around before we went on the air about, the tornado fires and murder hornets and what 2020 has been. But I think that is exactly the point of why this was so necessary, because again, another black man was shot by the police. The latest report is he's paralyzed, was shot in the back 7 times. And so I think the fact that,
range.
Right. And I think that because all of this is going on, and the guy said going in, the Breonna Taylor case, George Floyd, that there was hesitancy, and some guys didn't even come to the bubble because they specifically didn't want the message to get lost. And I think this is a reminder that with all of this going on, the players have decided we're not going to let the message get lost, and we are reaffirming our commitment to standing up for ourselves and our brothers.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you asked before, Brian, my reaction to watching this in real time as, the Orlando Magic were on, taking the court, warming up, and the Bucks were nowhere to be seen in their locker room. And eventually the Magic went back into the locker room, and you're just watching this unfold in real time. My initial reaction is being pretty jaw-dropped by it, just because this isn't something that you expect. The magnitude of what's happening right now, both in terms of the messaging and the potential impact that the players are looking for, and also where we are, the postseason, a restart that so far has been terrific. The basketball has been, I think, really. I don't
think this could have been any more successful had the NBA kind of drawn it up in its like ultimate wild dream scenario.
Right. A lot of the guys are having a hard time.
And I want to get to that. That's something that I want to spend some time on.
But as far as the basketball itself, and as far as keeping guys safe and healthy, I agree with you completely.
But then once I got past the, oh my God, element of, this game is clearly en route to being at minimum postponed, or whatever jargon you want to use for this, and figuring out where does it go from here? Because you kind of figure, well, if this game isn't going on, the Rockets and Thunder aren't going to want to play. Lakers and Blazers, there's going to be floodgates opening in this, because you're going to be reflecting what a lot of players want to do anyway, and somebody had to be first.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, like, from there, you start thinking about it and you say, well, I didn't predict this happening, but the signs of it happening were there. You saw George Hill in the immediate aftermath of Jacob Blake saying we shouldn't be here in the first place. We shouldn't have gone. I believe he said we shouldn't have gone down to this damn place in the first place. We should still be out, trying to apply pressure, trying to be at whatever protests are still handling. If nothing else, if you remember the Milwaukee Bucks being in Kenosha, we should be there.
Right. It's not an accident that the Bucks, not only because they are, this is their backyard, but also, Sterling Brown, John Henson. These are people, who have direct stories to tell, as I'm sure there are other stories that haven't been told, but that are very high profile stories that deal with this issue of police misconduct.
I think it was also important that they were the first game of the day, and the team that decided. Yeah, and also the interesting parallel is probably not the right word for it, but the interesting connection that 4 years to the day of today, Colin Kaepernick was the first game he took. Well, in that game he sat down.
Right.
It was before a Green Beret, Nate Boyer, asked him to kneel instead of sit down. Also, they were playing in Green Bay, so also in Wisconsin, 4 years ago to the day.
Yeah, I mean, it's the world works in weird ways in terms of signs and things coming full circle. And, this has been, in a lot of ways, unfortunately sparked by tragedy after tragedy after tragedy, but it has been the year of Colin Kaepernick. I mean, it really has been the year where
not yet.
I think well,
not yet.
He
still owed an apology. Roger Goodell has said, I wish I would have listened more. He is still owed an apology. And I still maintain he is one of the best 64 quarterbacks on planet Earth and should have a job.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting discussion, because in some ways, and I don't want to go too far down this particular rabbit hole, but I agree with you that Colin Kaepernick absolutely is good enough to be in the NFL. Like, the question of whether or not he's still good enough to start, I don't know, and I don't think anybody can give a qualified answer one way or the other. There is a part of me, though, that would rather see Colin Kaepernick directly involved with NFL initiatives or task force or things like that, because my concern would be that if he's put on an NFL roster in a way that feels decorative, for lack of a better way of putting it, the NFL can let themselves off the hook too easily. They stole the man's career.
Correct.
They stole the man's the prime of his career. And I feel there's a part of me that feels like, actually very strongly, that Colin Kaepernick being on the roster, possibly, if not more likely as a backup, very likely not even stepping on the field, that becoming the NFL fulfilling its obligation lets the NFL off way too easily.
Okay, I see that. I see where you're coming from. My response to that is, the man has dedicated his life to playing quarterback in the NFL, and that was taken from him. So if he wants to play,
yeah, it's a Colin Kaepernick choice.
Sure. Right, I don't give a shit if it's decorative. If the man wants to play football, let him play football.
But I'll bring it back.
I would never not let him play.
Sure,
I make sure that's clear.
But I think if he does make a roster or is given a roster spot, even if it is decorative, it is still incumbent upon him and the three of us and everybody in sports media and fans and everybody in the NFL world to say, okay, you took the first baby step, but this is not good enough. So if we let them off the hook because of that, that's on us.
Yes. And
Yes.
I agree with you. And
Yep.
to tie it back
Absolutely.
to what we're seeing now, so much of what I'm seeing on Twitter, and I realize just that sentence in and of itself is problematic. But
I am officially terrified.
Right. So much of what I'm seeing is either empathy and understanding. And, as I think as white people, as that's what, like, whenever this sort of thing happens, it's like increasingly, as I think, as even somebody who considered myself open-minded and empathetic, whatever, learning and understanding more about really what this is and what what it is to say Black Lives Matter and all these other things that whether there should be or not, there's a learning curve.
Mm-hmm.
There are still so many people who look at this without those things and they just say, oh, well, what good is this going to do? It's just a gesture. It's just a symbol. The same people will do that. Will argue then about, why are you taking down, this statue of a Confederate general over here? It's just a symbol. It's just a gesture. It's just whatever. We live in a world where symbols and gestures matter, where change in this country is very difficult to do in anything but incremental steps. We don't have a government that's set up for that. We don't have a society that is built around rapid, like genuinely rapid change. I'm not talking about something that takes 2 or 3 years where you look back on something 5 years later and go, wow, that kind of changed quickly. But I'm talking like, next week. What can happen tomorrow? What can happen next week? And I see so much stuff that's just like, it's just a gesture. Colin Kaepernick going back to playing, it's just a gesture. We're still kind of in a place right now where powerful people making powerful statements is what is available and is what is possible to keep attention where it belongs. I don't know where that gets you tomorrow, next week, the week after.
I don't agree. I
don't know
that it gets you anywhere tomorrow or the next day or the next day. However,
but I don't think it negates the effort to try, though.
Right. We have to start somewhere. And all of the things that we, Black people, have been trying haven't been working. Right. I mentioned earlier about how similar this is to something my father said 50 years ago. How similar this is to something Bill Russell did 60 years ago. What has been happening isn't working. I heard a really good analogy, and it was like a baby, right? And if a baby is dissatisfied by something, they're gonna like whine a little bit, right? And then if their need is still
clearly
not
you
met,
don't have children, Aaron.
I do not. I do not. I have nieces and nephews.
The answer is not a little bit. It's not a little bit.
No, but my point is they're gonna like whine. They're gonna whine a little bit, and then if whatever that need isn't met, they're gonna cry. And then if you still don't mean it, they're gonna scream. And if you still don't mean it, they may lash out and like hit you and whatever. Right? There is an escalation, a natural progression of these things that people, whatever it is, and it doesn't have to just be Black people. It's whatever, any group or any individual that feels like they are being treated unfairly is going to have a reaction to that. And that reaction, if it doesn't resolve their issue, is going to continue to be elevated until they feel like people are paying attention. I've had a real problem with people describing even the protests around George Floyd and the subsequent protests. And then I've had a problem with people describing it as random, all these like random riots and protests and acts of violence. It isn't random. It is a natural progression and reaction to systemic racism, to people feeling like, and in my opinion, accurately feeling like they're not being heard. They're not being taken seriously. And the players putting pressure on the owners and the corporate partners and businesses that they deal with is frankly the only way that anything is going to change, right? And hitting them in the pockets, like, we're not going to play. You are not going to make your money off of our backs until we get something that we feel addresses these issues. I think it's a good approach because frankly, people that look like me can't do anything about it. We've been trying for 400 years. We can't. We need white people to help. And so the ownership groups, people that are very wealthy, that are generally white, are far more powerful than even the players. We all love watching the players on Twitter. People love talking about the players, and they're everybody's heroes. But the people with real power are politicians and very rich, generally white people.
Connected to those politicians often.
They are the people that can actually affect change. And I had a conversation with one of those people recently about all of this. And that person was very interested in learning what my experience as a Black man has been like in this country. And that person said, I think now we might actually get some change. I said I was very skeptical. And their response was, because people that look like me, that person, a white person, and that person's friends were finally like understanding, even very well-meaning people were finally understanding, like, maybe this isn't great. And they were people who have like all of the best intentions, but have benefited from a system that benefits them. So they just don't really pay attention to it. And now finally, those people, well-meaning people, are starting to pay attention and say, you know what, this ain't great. Maybe we should do something about this.
Well, here's what I did today. I'm at home. I'm getting some work done. It's pandemic. Andy and I aren't with ESPN anymore. Like, there's a lot going on. Like, and everybody's got a lot of stuff. And I'm watching the news go through. I'm trying to get 2 or 3 things other done. My kids are finishing up their school day. We've got a park,
how's that going?
Like a fun
school at home.
That's a whole other podcast. You're
not missing much, Aaron.
Yeah. Do not adopt school age children right now. Like,
I like to say, this is the thing that like bonds me and LeBron. Nothing by accident.
Exactly.
Yeah. I would say, Aaron, if you're going to be adopting, I would adopt either children like 2, 3 years old that aren't going to school, or
like a 30-year-old. Adopt a 27-year-old.
Adopt a kid old enough that you can kick him out of the
house. Outside of mandatory health insurance.
Exactly. Yeah. Just all of it. But so, I mean, we have, I promised
adopt
the kids
somebody older than you.
But I promised the kids I would take them to the park, and so we went out and we did that. Like, they got to get outside, and I come home and I'm still trying to sort of following the news. And we had dinner, and I helped get the baby to bed, and I'm singing songs, and we're doing all that stuff. And one of the things that kept occurring to me, and I think is so important and so profound about the story that you just told, is that the thought that, like, is that all of what the NBA players are protesting, all about what people in Kenosha are protesting and across the country post George Floyd, and I had these thoughts then too, is the hyper awareness about how I could really ignore all of it and and it would have no effect on my life. Mm-hmm. Like, I could, my kids could, we could basically, if we chose to, go through our lives and really not consider these things.
That
the
destroys your
profound
humanity,
unfairness of that, and how horrible that must be for the people who can't.
Well, I think the best thing on television, I tweeted this out last night or 2 nights. I think it was 2 nights ago. I think the best thing on television, bar none, is Inside the NBA. Yes. It is hilarious. It is always entertaining. It is informative when it needs to be. It is social when it needs to be. And Kenny Smith was talking about, and he walked off the set today.
Yes.
And he was talking about a couple nights ago, just the difference in experience. And LeBron talked about this too, just how exhausting it is to be a Black man. It's just exhausting. There is a constant pressure. There is a constant hyper awareness that you need to have. And Kenny also talked about, like, everybody on set. Have you ever had a gun pulled on you? Shaq said yes, but not by the police. Charles said no. EJ, of course, said no. They went around to all of the camera people. No. And it is just, in large part, it is just a different country for people that look different. Yeah. And that is at the core of our our country is based on that not being the case.
I had a really interesting recent experience in a Facebook thread for somebody that I knew from high school.
You think Twitter's bad? Facebook.
Yeah. Oh, well, this one in particular, this girl that I used to be friends with in high school that
you guys dated, didn't you?
No, we did not date. But I fear she's turned into quite the Karen. And she's very much in a police can do no wrong, blue lives matter, like beyond even. She would make vague, platitude statements about, things need to change or, that, but
there's always the comma,
right, but she was,
it's always
but she was very specific about what it was. Mostly just somehow these bad cops need to be weeded out through no action whatsoever. We'll just wake up one day and every bad cop in her mind, the, very, very, very narrow minority of bad cops will just one day disappear without any types of real reforms whatsoever. But I was debating this with her in a Facebook thread, and another friend of ours from high school, who's black, joined.
Did you date him? Did you date him or her?
I dated neither of them.
Okay.
Although, hey, no judgment if I had, but but I did.
Right. I prefer the story where you dated both of them.
Well, at the same time,
it would be more interesting of a story for sure. Frankly, it's more interesting than having dated neither. But anyway, he in this thread mentioned how one time we were in high school and I was driving that night and we ended up getting pulled over twice in the same night. And both incidents of getting pulled over didn't really amount to much of anything from my perspective. And I had, to be honest, forgotten about this until he brought it up. My friend had not forgotten about it. And I recognized in that moment that I had a luxury of forgetting about it. Mm-hmm. And to me, it felt in that moment fairly insignificant and, getting picked on by the police, but for very different reasons, just feeling like you're a teenager and cops are messing with you. But I remember those two times getting pulled over in that night and it being frustrated that it was twice in one night. But there was never any concern in my mind that it was going to escalate into anything beyond that. And for my friend, it was a completely different experience. And then he asked in this thread, have you ever been pulled over twice in one night other than that? And I really thought about it because over the course of my life, I've accumulated a lot of tickets and have actually been pulled over a fair amount of times.
Tremendously bad driver.
Not so much a bad
You're saying
driver.
It's warranted.
In certain cases, yes. But you know what?
Especially in your younger years, you had a loose regard for the rules.
I did have a loose regard for the rules.
Did this permeate all aspects of your life, or just driving?
Many, not all. All is a different word.
Yeah,
many.
Many. Okay.
But you know what? It's funny too because, and the answer to that question, by the way, was no. That it had never happened to me before. And it was interesting that the one time it ever did happen, I happened to have a black guy riding shotgun with me.
I'm gonna throw out a guess and say that's not coincidental.
I'm not going to argue with you.
Particularly where we grew up.
But you can Google St. Louis racial problems and then just make yourself a sandwich.
I have family that lives in St. Louis, Florissant, and.
Yes. Florissant, where Mike Brown, that incident
very near
ended up happening.
Yeah.
But Ferguson is right near Florissant.
Yeah.
But also though, it got me thinking about there was a time where I did get pulled over by a cop for what was clearly trumped up bullshit. Mm-hmm. Like his explanation for why I got pulled over made no sense. I actually called him out on it. I said, I'm going to court over this, went to court. The judge dismissed it. The judge agreed with me that his rationale made no sense at all. But even in that moment where I felt rightly singled out, I was never worried about my safety. I felt aggregated for what I was going through in that moment. But there is a level where, as somebody white in this country, you're going to feel like it's likely not going to get past a certain point. Even
it doesn't occur to you.
Cognizant of what other people go through.
It doesn't even occur to you
again
that an interaction with a police officer would turn that way.
Even well-meaning people, look, you can't. It is not possible. You can empathize, but it is not possible for people to experience what other people experience. It just isn't possible.
No.
So when this reminds me of the talk of white privilege, and people say, I had it really rough growing up. White people, I was really poor growing up. Like, I had it rough growing up and had struggles coming up, and therefore I don't have white privilege. And I think that is missing the point. Saying somebody has white privilege doesn't mean that they haven't had struggles in their life. Doesn't mean that they haven't had it rough. Doesn't mean that their life at some parts hasn't been really difficult or horrible. What it means is that none of those difficulties were because of their skin color. So, you definitely, it's very possible, I believe you were pulled over on some trumped up bullshit, right? But what you weren't pulled over for is because you're white.
Right.
That's the difference.
Absolutely.
And you thought, I don't think at any point in your mind, I'm speaking for you, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think at any point you had the thought that this interaction was going to, other than it was an annoyance, that it was going to go very, very badly, possibly fatally badly for you.
If I had those type of fears, I wouldn't have stood up for myself in the moment the way that I did. I would have been looking to comply as quickly as I possibly could in order to try to get through it. So if I had really been that scared of what could happen if I piss off this cop, I was not worried about pissing off this cop. I told this cop to his face, "You're making this up."
So I one of the best ways for me to describe this is I talked about this, that same conversation I was referring to earlier, when they were asking me what it is like. And the best way I could describe it is I cannot imagine a scenario in which I personally would call the police. I can't think of a scenario in which I would feel better off if the police were involved. If somebody breaks in my house, I'm dealing with it. If I get in a car accident, I'm dealing with it. If somebody comes up and tries to rob me, I'm dealing with it. I can't think of anything where I would feel better off because the police got involved. And look, maybe it is 75 or 80 or 90% or 99% of the cops are good cops. Maybe that's what it is. However, when whatever the good percentage is, when they are not calling out and stopping the awful behavior of the bad ones, the lines start to blur.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because and again, this is something that when you focus to the responsibilities of white people, because it's not a question, and this is something else that becomes very frustrating. I think because people don't like the implications of what it means of systemic racism, of what it means about yourself and what it means about your own biases and whatever it might be. Because I don't think most people go out into the world intending to be racist. I don't think most people intend to be bad people.
I agree.
But you are influenced, whether you are a police officer of a lot of any race. Oftentimes, I mean, a lot of the research shows.
Sure.
By the institutions that are around you. And so, when you talk about white privilege, I've had this conversation with our dad, who falls into the category that you're talking about, as somebody who grew up in a very dysfunctional family with very little money. And he, worked his way through school, and he worked his way through medical school. And he worked his way to a point where Andy and I don't just have white privilege, we have regular privilege. We have all of the privileges, you know? And so it is a difficult concept for him to understand, because his first instinct is to interpret it the way that you framed it, where people, but I had all of this, and this, nobody gave me anything. And it takes a while. And I've had conversations with him. He's learning that he's getting the point that it's not about you. It's about the framework around all of us, and how many things that I just didn't know about, didn't think to think about,
Mhm.
that I now need to make sure that I am. I don't know what to do with a lot of those things. I don't know what to do, like the next step. Like what is, I mean, I think my initial instinct is to listen and let somebody who is in that group, who is Black, who is brown, who is a minority, who deals with these things in ways that I don't, to tell me. And listen to that
by the
person.
way,
It's
that's
not,
a great,
I tell
that
you what,
is
it
a great
isn't.
first step. No, but
Yeah.
that has been the fact that people, many more people now, because of the last few months, are willing to acknowledge that there are issues. Even well-meaning people weren't willing to acknowledge that they benefited from a system that was designed to benefit them. Just the fact that listening and being willing to say, you know what, maybe this ain't great. Don't discount that step. Now, it still requires action, but don't discount that step.
It's important for people to understand, if you're white, that white privilege doesn't, saying that somebody benefits from white privilege is not the same thing as saying you tried to game the system in your favor. It simply means that you are a part of this system, whether you are a willing party to it or not. You're a small cog in the machine, however you want to put it, but it's not an accusation. You know, it's not even saying that you were willing to look past it, you know, whatever. It's not an accusation of character.
No, it's not meant as an indictment unless you actively, right.
If you're actively looking to feed off it, then yeah, it's an indictment of your character, and it should be. Yeah. But you know, whether you are a willing party to it or not, whether you are against it or not, doesn't change the fact that it exists. And it would be very helpful if a lot of white people simply just didn't take it personally, the idea that it exists, like it somehow means that you got handed something, or again, that you tried to game a system.
No, you got handed whiteness. It doesn't mean you had it easy.
Right.
It just means whatever difficulty you had wasn't because of the color of your skin, which you had nothing to do with.
Exactly.
And I whatever you think of Black Lives Matter, put that aside for a second. You were referencing that Facebook post. The Blue Lives Matter thing it's silliness. It just is. You can be entirely for, supporting police officers. I would personally disagree with you, but you can certainly be for that, right? But it is silly. Blue Lives Matter is as a retort to Black Lives Matter is just silliness. When you go home, you can take off your uniform. You're not. I can't look now. I have nice lighting here, so I'm a little washed out. So I'm a little lighter than I actually am. But I can't take this off, right? I can't. A cop on his day off can walk down the street.
I mean, you could do something about that haircut, but you can't do something about the other stuff.
Oh, I need to. I usually shave my head. I do this just to rub it in y'all face that I have hair and you don't.
Yeah, and we've picked up on that.
Keep me on. Keep
it has not
me
been
coming
lost
back once a month. Come back once a month.
Okay, but to your point, swinging this back to the NBA.
Yes, let's.
Doc Rivers, talking about this issue passionately after the Clippers Game 5 win over the Mavericks.
Yeah, they put 150 on the Mavs. Yeah.
Talking about this very passionately, it frankly looked like Doc was on the verge of breaking down emotionally.
I think he was.
His father is a policeman, and he was, at least, and he said, I know that there are good cops out there, but the issues that exist, the systemic issues that exist within policing, even if you are willing to believe that the overwhelming majority of police are good, and for the purposes of what I'm about to say, I'm not even looking to debate that yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
It's very similar to what's going on right now in this country with COVID. I actually believe the majority of people in this country are looking to be reasonably responsible with this. Not perfect, and I don't think most people are perfect. I have not been letter perfect on everything that you're supposed to do. I have been, I think, very responsible, and I think very cautious. And I think most people are.
People are doing the best they can.
But the people that aren't, the people that look to flout the rules, the people that have turned this into a culture war, the people who've just said, I don't want to do this anymore, whatever, they make a big difference in trying to get us through this. In the same way, whatever percentage of police that are out there that you think are bad police, high percentage, low percentage, they make a massive difference. They change the entire ecosystem of the police force.
Well, there's the thing about, the one bad, it's just bad apples. That's the refrain when something goes
right.
When somebody gets their neck knelt on for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, it's a one bad apple kind of thing. But if you continue that cliche forward, the one bad apple spoils the bushel.
Right.
And again, I will say again, I happen to think that the vast majority of white people are not racist, right? Most people aren't racist. Most people are genuinely good people, whatever it is, 90%, 99%, 75%, whatever. I think the majority of white people are well-meaning, not racist, maybe have some prejudices here and there. We all have some things, but they're good, genuinely good people. I think the same is probably true for police officers, right? Any community, there's good people and bad people. I think the same is probably true of police officers. Now, the police, because of many things we don't have enough time to get into, but because of pay structures, because of how they do recruiting, it doesn't necessarily recruit the upper crust of society, the most educated, etc. So there may be a slightly higher percentage of not great individuals, perhaps, in the police force. But I think the majority, if not overwhelming majority of police officers are probably good, decent people. However, for the good, decent white people, for the good, decent police officers that are the majority in both cases, why aren't you doing more about the not great white people, the not great police officers? And if you stand on the sideline and say, like, God, that's probably not great, but then let all these things happen, it becomes more and more difficult to tell the difference between the good ones and the bad ones.
This is where the institution matters. This is where, the structures that are built around police as a group, as an entity, police unions, as any of there is a protect our group first thing, and where it's very difficult to step out of line when you're part of any group. And I think that's at the core of what so much of this is about, is acknowledging, and what again we are being asked to do is acknowledging that these things are real, and it's a thing.
It's difficult. It was difficult when I was 10 years old and I went into maybe it was an Albertsons. I don't remember what it was. Maybe it was a Lucky's in San Francisco. And my buddy, after like 5th grade, wanted to steal a pack of Bubblicious. It was difficult for me to tell him, hey, that's probably not right. But as a grown ass man, you're watching somebody kneel on a man's neck for 8 minutes. He's handcuffed. Like that doesn't require that much.
No, and I think that's why George Floyd is different. I think that's why George Floyd has been different.
Yeah, that is fair.
And I think the reaction to it is different, than anything that we've seen before. And why the reaction to Jacob Blake is different than what we've seen before, especially when those two things are connected. What do you guys think happens going forward? Like, this is the league is in an extraordinary position. The players are in an extraordinary position. This was an effort to get the league functioning again and in a place where it can perform. Like, this is billions of dollars that are being put into this that are at stake. What happens? I don't, like you said earlier, Aaron, I don't think LeBron and the Clippers are, LeBron, the Lakers and the Clippers are going to just up and leave the bubble tomorrow. The reports are that they were the two teams that voted to not keep playing. But that doesn't necessarily mean games are going to be played. It doesn't necessarily mean the Lakers are going to take the floor again. And apparently at least again, by some of the reporting, the meeting that the players had was a contentious one.
Yeah.
What happens?
My best guess, I think the season will finish for a variety of reasons. I think if the players do decide that they are going to walk away, and look, let me be clear, if LeBron decides the season is over, the season is over.
Mm-hmm.
If LeBron decides the season is over for him, not even for the Lakers, if LeBron decides the season is over for him, that means the season is over for the Lakers, and it means the season is over, period.
And I think LeBron is extremely aware of that.
Yes.
He knows.
I agree.
What he does with that knowledge remains to be seen, but he absolutely is aware of what he means as a domino in all this.
You're 100% right. I mentioned it earlier about the only way that LeBron and I relate, but I will mention it again. Nothing by accident, right? There's nothing that happens for LeBron, with LeBron, or around LeBron. In all of my time around him, there is nothing by accident. He knows what he's doing. He knows what his impact on any situation will be. He knows how he fits into it. He knows how all the pieces around fit into it. My suspicion is that the season will finish, but I suspect we're not going to see games for a week or two until the players feel comfortable with whatever plan the league, the individual team owners, and all of the advertising partners and big business corporations that are connected to the league. They're going to feel it in their pockets a little bit. And I think the players unified want to see what impetus that causes, what those entities are willing, those people and those entities are willing to do to further the message, to tap into those political contacts, to support initiatives, to donate money, to like actual actionable plans that says, you know what, I think we can now, the players, I think we can now move this forward more by being here and in conjunction, as opposed to saying, fuck this, we're not doing it anymore. Now what are you going to do? But I think it is going to take maybe a week or two for those demands is not, you know what, they are demands.
No, they are demands.
Yeah, enough of this like around the margin, around the edges shit. They are demands.
I think the players have to decide what those demands are.
That's something I was talking on Twitter early with Wazen Lambry with The Athletic and other
Big Waz,
podcasts. Yeah, Big Waz.
Yeah.
And he and I were talking about how, and this was before the Bucks actually made this decision not to play in the ripple effect, but when there was talk of it potentially happening, because there had even been talk about, you know, the Raptors and Celtics potentially boycotting.
Fred VanVleet for like a week now has been saying, I don't know what we're doing here. Like, this is kind of, the message is dying. This is,
But one of the things he and I were talking about is the difference between statements versus endgame. And what the players' endgame is in all of this is going to be fascinating and frankly historical to watch. Like, because you have to know what you want out of this. Because if you restart, and you get a sense from some reports that the majority of players would like to restart.
They've gone through so much.
No, I agree. But
to this point,
you're right. You are completely right. And I think in the end, I think it will restart for the reasons you're mentioning. But that doesn't matter. But it doesn't matter. What the majority of players want doesn't matter. LeBron said what he wanted to say, voted how he wanted to say, wanted to vote, and walked out. LeBron is the NBA. Whatever LeBron decides is what is going to happen.
Right, but it also was more
the rank and file NBA, whatever.
But it was more also of an informal vote. Like, we haven't gotten
no, it's not an official, right. Agreed.
LeBron, the Lakers, the Clippers have not committed themselves to anything at this point.
They want to see what the owners are going to come back with.
Exactly. And I think all things being equal, the Lakers and Clippers would like to play. I mean, they may all feel like this is the worst time to be playing, but we're here. We'd like to finish what we started. And it's going to be interesting to see, because we're going to start hearing about what they actually want, what they're going to be looking for from the owners in terms of whether or not it's applying pressure to the contacts that they have politically, across different industries, whatever. These are very powerful. If you own an NBA team, by definition, you are a powerful person. You are somebody that
Absolutely.
can get a meeting with anybody. You're somebody that can get anybody on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
The Bucks got today people from Wisconsin government on the phone.
Attorney General, yeah.
Exactly. So what they want from this, whether it's in terms of trying to force policy, whether it's money coming from the teams themselves, the NBA had already made a commitment of $300 million over the next 10 years through a foundation that they created that would go towards trying to grow different Black businesses, Black economy, opportunity. It's also going to be really interesting to see how different owners react to this, because this is something that not only will be politicized, it is being politicized at the moment. This is going on the backdrop of an RNC that
of course.
Right now, a lot of the messaging is law and order, like you had said before, Blue Lives Matter, that protests and riots are enveloping America. And this is something that this current administration has and will continue to weaponize as a wedge issue.
The contrast of this with what's happening at the RNC tonight, with these just, we talk so much about two Americas, however many America, like it is Earth 1 and Earth 2.
Yes.
But also too, the reason I mention this isn't just to talk about the politicizing that's eventually going to happen and the spillover effect with America in general. You're also talking about with NBA owners, there are some people with very deep ties to the GOP or to the Trump administration. Dan Gilbert, his building hosted the RNC in 2016. Tillman Fertitta is very connected with Trump. Betsy DeVos is the Secretary of Education. The DeVos family owns the Magic. And, the Magic put out a very boilerplate statement today about being united with the NBA.
Yeah,
officers,
I did like the Magic saying, like,
yes, but
you guys cannot show up. We ain't taking the forfeit.
Right, but and that was great too. That was fantastic. But
I think
where it goes from here is going to be really interesting.
I agree with that, and I think it is very smart. Okay, so I studied economics and like a lot of negotiation, and basically rule number 1 of negotiation is don't be the first person to give a number, right? And so I think what the players are doing here is pretty smart they may have internally, they may have some ideas, but in not letting those leak out or not releasing those, I think what they're doing may be smart in saying, okay, governors, owners, whoever, you guys meet tomorrow. What do you have for us? You guys decide what you're going to do. Because I think in holding what the players are doing now is holding the league, teams, team partners, TV networks, et cetera, is holding their feet to the fire. And the players are wielding that power of, look, this can't happen without us. The league is 80% Black? Y'all can't do this without us, period.
Right. And that was the statement that the Lakers put out. You talk, Andy, you mentioned the sort of anodyne statement that the Magic put out. The one that the Lakers put out was much more direct and much more forceful.
Yes, it was.
I think it was the only. I think it was the only one. I said on Twitter that I'm very proud to be associated with the Lakers. I believe it was the only one I've seen in the NBA and probably from any sports team that specifically mentioned police brutality and murder. I don't think it said murder. Killings by police officers. I believe it was the only one that specifically mentioned that.
Right, because there are. And if you're not okay with them not using certain words, there are rules.
Yes. Indeed.
Indeed. The Lakers cannot just tell people that they're murdering.
No, the Lakers statement was pretty strong.
It was
it was very strong.
I'm actually trying to pull it up right now. Here it is. We stand.
You got it. Okay.
We stand with our players. That's the part that everyone says. 80% of this is the part where you were referencing, Aaron. 80% of NBA players are Black men. We cannot love them for the joy and entertainment that they bring to the world, yet sit in silence and fail to use our platforms and resources to amplify their voices when they demand the justice and equality that America has promised us all, but denied Black people for too long. And it goes on to talk about the victims of police violence. That
and
sentence,
hold on, let me say this. I promise you, I know this for a fact. I promise you, that is not a PR, media relations, public relations thing. That comes from the absolute top of the organization.
Absolutely,
the
100%.
Absolute top.
And I believe every word of that. And this is the part that I think is critical. And if you're a person at home, and I spent a lot of tonight, we talked a lot about things I've done today since the announcements, all these things came out. Another one of the things.
Are you teaching your children? That terrifies me.
Not well.
That's why he's got time to think about all this.
Right, exactly. Children, learn your own arithmetic. I'm thinking. It's for all of these people that are so bothered. Well, what do you? And I know, Andy, the question about what happens next and what actually is the end game is important, and I'm not trying to discount it. But for people who are upset because, oh well, what is this going to do? Like, what's the point? Like, oh, this is going to end racism tomorrow. All these other things. Ask yourself, why are you so angry that these people chose not to play tonight? What harm does it do to you? Why are you upset by that? And I think this sentence, we cannot love them for the joy and entertainment that they bring to the world, yet sit in silence and fail to use our platforms and resources to amplify their voices, is critical, because we treat athletes like they are there for our entertainment. And what these players said tonight is, no, we are not. We are here to provide you.
They're not there solely for it.
Right.
They are there for our entertainment, but that's
right,
not
but
all
that's
they're
not
there
their,
you
that's not their primary
you love
purpose.
Black culture, but you don't love Black people.
Yes. In the same way that you, guy on Twitter who's mad, you don't exist in this world simply for me to use you as my accountant or call you for services or have you help me when I'm at a restaurant or whatever it is that you do. Like, your existence is larger than that. You are not first and foremost the thing that you do for a living that services other people. And if you're upset because they're not out there doing the thing that you want to do because it's 2020 and it sucks and you need entertainment, then the problem is you, not them. That is something that people need to grapple with if they are having trouble.
Yes. I like a fundamental point or question in all of this is, why people fighting against racism or fighting against injustice, or like, how is that offensive to people? Like, what are you arguing against? Like, how does people saying like, this is not okay, Black people can't be treated that, like, how does that offend you? I don't understand that. That is strange to me.
Before we're done, I do want to take a minute, because related to this story, and it's sort of been absorbed into what happened today and so many other things, is the Paul George story about, he talked very openly after, I guess it was game 4, correct? About
five.
Game five,
yeah. After their big, yeah.
About sort of the depression that he had felt and the anxiety and being inside the bubble and all these other things. And first and foremost, I want to apologize, because I was one of the a-holes who, on Monday, after he had another terrible playoff performance,
be sure to mention, for people who may not be able to distinguish our voices listening right now.
That was me, Brian. But
thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
I forget it's not just a live video. It's like a lot of people. I made playoff P jokes and this and that.
Hold on. Now look, I will get into this. I am someone who also suffers from like some depression, and so I get it. But to be fair, some of it he also brings on himself.
I don't disagree with that, and that's sort of where I was going. And like, regardless of whether or not some of those things are related to things that happened 3 years ago or 2 years ago, or whatever, where there's a trend in his play, or some of the things that he says or whatever, it is a reminder that all of this stuff, because like things have been going so well in the bubble. Andy and I remember podcast after podcast, interview after interview, radio appearance after radio, talk about like, this is going to suck. Guys are isolated without their families. You can't leave. I realize it's Disney World. It's a great place. They're being treated nicely and all that. You're still in this place where you can't go. And
we really tried hard to drive that home. I mean, maybe some more NBA players need.
And then I didn't pay attention to my own thing there. And it is a reminder, and as all of these things are, as the day's events are, that these people are people. And, you know, it's not that they're above criticism, and our job is to talk about them, and their job is to play. And sometimes you're right, they do bring things on themselves. But it is part of the empathy that I think is required,
Absolutely.
big picture for all of this, to understand. Just stop before I make the very easy and, quite frankly, funny Paul George joke that I made, a few of them.
Yeah.
To just stop and be like, hold on a second. Am I considering the sort of the empathy? Am I thinking about this thing the whole way through? And it doesn't mean so.
All
I'm saying is, like, I came up short, I think, in this regard here, in underestimating what it is that these guys are impacted by.
So
that I should do better.
I've talked to not just a lot of the guys, but not just the guys, players, but also, you know, the coaches and all of, like, our colleague media people. And it has been, for everything that the NBA has done an incredible job putting this together. But for everything the NBA has done, like, it is, there have been human difficulties there, and people are frankly pretty miserable there for a variety of reasons. And I think we have to make a distinction between, and look, I mentioned it a few minutes ago, I am someone who, like, suffers from depression. I am someone who suffers from mental illness, and I commend Paul George incredibly for being so open in that interview and admitting that he was struggling, right? Because a lot of people see athletes as superhuman, these superstars and superheroes, and it will do wonders for kids, for people who have not come to terms with what they are feeling yet, to say, you know what, I feel like Paul George feels, and so I commend him for that. But I think it is important to separate the, like, look, first of all, Twitter is at this point pretty much for absorbing news and making jokes, and that's it. But I think
don't forget the cesspool, Aaron.
It does
exist to be a cesspool.
I don't look at my mentions very often.
Let's not forget that.
But I think it is fair to make a distinction between, like, we're making fun of Paul George because he's 3 for 19 and not doing much, and, like, that, whatever. But when he starts going after other guys, when he was going after Dame and all of that, like, I think those are separate things, and some of that people are bringing, in this case is bringing on himself.
Yeah.
But I commend him 100 as somebody who suffers, and as somebody who knows how dark it can be even in the best of times. I can't imagine what those guys are going through, being separated, and just, like, it's just not great.
Especially to the anxiety that it's become clear is being caused by not just the long time that you're in this bubble. I mean, these teams have been in there a while.
Yeah, at this point. Yeah.
Right. I mean, these teams have been there.
We're coming up on 2 months here pretty soon.
They've been there for a while. And, you know, depending on which team you're a part of, for example, the Clippers, you know, the odds favor, if you keep playing the way you're expected to, you're going to be there a while more.
At least another month.
You're not leaving anytime soon.
Yeah.
And then when you combine everything that's going on in the real world, whether you're talking about the pandemic, whether you're talking about an economic recession, whether you're talking about systemic racism that keeps cyclically rearing its head.
Mm-hmm. And then also sorry to interrupt you, but also all of those things, you're right about all of those things, Andy, that you're mentioning, but also because you're in the bubble, your inability to do anything about
that's where I was going with this. It's one thing to feel like you don't know what to do about it when you're free to do whatever you want. You just have to figure out what it is. It's quite another thing to not know what to do about it, or maybe even know exactly what you want to do about it, but not be free to do about it at all. And then I think about
that's the crux of where they are right now.
Think about your loved ones who are in the middle of this, not sheltered inside this bubble, sheltered in a lot of different ways. And that can cause everything from anxiety to anger to guilt. And that is not going to be easy for any of these guys.
I think, and just to kind of wrap it back up, I mean, I think that helps explain why the NBA got to the place and players got to the place they are now. Because even if you believe that, I personally do not think that it would be much different. I don't think the message has been diluted. I don't think momentum has been lost because NBA players went and played basketball. I don't think that's how this works. I think, life is just not that linear in that sense. I don't think ending the bubble changes a whole lot necessarily, because this is a long-term, multi-layered, multifaceted thing that is being fought against.
And I just want to say this quickly because it's important. It's not the NBA players' responsibility to solve.
Correct.
Like
absolutely.
It is commendable how much all of them care and how much of them really want to get their hands dirty in terms of trying to be a part of the solution, but this is not their problem to solve.
Correct.
No, but all of us, it's all of our problem.
Yes,
especially all of us that are affected. It is all of our problem.
But I mean specifically theirs.
Yeah,
like it is not specifically.
But we
problem.
say, but there's actually, this is I'm about to acknowledge my religious unintelligence here.
Well, you're in the perfect place.
Cheers. This is paraphrasing. I don't know if this is
a safe space.
I don't know if this is a Bible thing or if it is just a cliche, but too much is given, much is expected, right? And so the guys
dangerously close to Spider-Man.
I was just going to say, which is
right.
The book of Spider-Man.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Right.
So they must have gotten that from the Bible. I think if I haven't butchered the Bible.
Or did the Bible steal it from Spider-Man? I'm not sure.
Also possible. Who's the famous comic book guy that passed away?
Stan Lee.
Yeah, Stan Lee. Right.
How new is the New Testament?
He was about that old.
Yeah, he was 90 something, right? So I think that the players are feeling we are the ones, because the league is predominantly black. We are the ones, us, our family, our friends are most affected by this.
Yes.
Right.
But because of what we do, we also have the ability to speak not only for our friends and family, but we have options and avenues open to us that frankly normal brothers don't have. So I think that it is not entirely on them to solve this, but I think they are seeing, to speak for them. I've spoken to some of them about this. I don't want to speak for them, but to speak for them, I think they are feeling the responsibility because they have that platform. And because I personally, I'm not going to speak for either of you two, but I feel like there is a void in leadership. And this is not even like a political thing, not a everybody go vote for whoever you think you should vote for. This is not a Donald Trump thing. This is not a political thing at all, but because I think a lot of those guys are feeling a void in leadership, whether it's at the federal level, the state level, even the city, county levels, that they are feeling like they have to step in and fill that void because it is their responsibility, because they have that voice.
Yeah, it is. These are fascinating times on multiple levels. And I think, as we end here, regardless of whether or not you think it is going to be an effective move that the players made today, that it'll be followed by effective moves tomorrow, or that ultimately in 6 months, all of this will matter or none of this matters. I think it's an effective
move already. The three of us are talking about it. It's an effective move.
But you have to respect, and you have to respect the action. You have to respect the willingness to just say, no, we're doing maybe it's not perfectly well thought. Maybe it's not planned all the way to the end, but no, something is more important than this. No, we will not play.
The talk has always been LeBron. This is year 17. He's 35, right? Is this his last real chance at winning a championship? Yeah. He's willing to risk that.
Yes.
There's whether you agree with him or not, there's something commendable about that.
Should have done this before. Thanks again to Delicious Pizza. 20% off either location when you tell them Cam Brothers sent you, deliciouspizza.com, or when you call it in. Great food, local business in LA.
It is really good.
It is
I'm
really
not even
good.
a part of this. It is really
no,
good.
it is really good.
It's
and,
really
and a huge Laker fan
I was
that
just
you're
gonna
supporting
say.
in Michael Ross.
Yeah.
So thank you to them. Thank you, Delicious Pizza. Thank you to Delicious Vinyl for helping us with the music that you hear on the podcast. That is done out of their generosity as well. And thank you especially to Aaron Larsoul of the Official Lakers Podcast. This was awesome. We are very happy that we had lined you up before any of this happened.
Good timing.
It's a much worse conversation if it's just me and Andy. I'll tell you that.
Am I other than Brad Turner, am I the only black person you know other than BT? Maybe
no. We know at least 3 others.
All of whom are busy tonight.
Right.
Y'all start counting black people like John Rocker. I get concerned.
No.
I mean,
how dare you? That's this. I hope you enjoyed your last invite on this show.
I'm not going to be one of these people that lies. Oh, I got thousands of black friends. No, I don't. no. But I know more than you. You're not it, Aaron. Get over yourself.
All right. Okay. All right.
Well, I guarantee I have more than John Rocker.
That's right. Yes.
All right.
I'll take that. Hope. I'll take those odds.
Let's hope.
I'm very confident with that.
It was fun. Thank y'all for having me.
Thanks a lot, man. Really appreciate it. How do I always forget how to turn this thing off. Here we go.
You had trouble turning it on, so why would you have trouble turning it off?
All right. We'll see everybody next time.